Welcome to Hispanic Biz, Stories of Success, where we interview Hispanic business owners to learn from them their successes, their triumphs, and their challenges, hoping that you learn from these stories and are inspired and encouraged. Today we're fortunate to have with us Mr. Roberto G. Torres, a CPA, who's owner of Roberto G. Torres and Company. Thank you, Mr. Torres, for your time. I appreciate your coming.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Torres, you built a successful CPA firm, and that's very technical. And I'm interested in and I think it'd be interesting to learn from you about how you prepared for that. You're an El Paso native. You grew up in El Paso?
Born and raised, yes, sir.
And you went to, what elementary schools did you go to?
Well, I went a couple of years to Marion Manor, and then we moved to the Loma Terrace area, so I ended up going to Loma Terrace, 2nd grade through 8th grade. And after that, I went to Jesuit High School. And then after that, I went on to UTEP, where I graduated with a BBA in accounting.
Okay. So when you went to Jesuit, you almost walked to school if you were in the Loma Terrace area.
In fact, we did walk to school.
Wow. Were you very good in math?
Fortunately, yes, I was pretty good in math.
So you had Toby Tovar happened to be a teacher of yours by chance?
Yes, Mr. Tovar was our teacher for the full 4 years that I was at school.
Really?
Turns out, obviously he's a very popular teacher in El Paso, and went on to, after Jesuit closed, he went on to El Paso High and taught over there and was quite popular with the students. Yeah,
he taught calculus and all. He's passed away now. He was a good friend. But he had a legend. He was a baseball player too, by chance.
Yes, we were aware. He used to sometimes take the baseball bat to class.
No, I knew him as a young boy, where he grew up. Your parents, what can you tell us about your parents?
Well, my father was self-employed. He was a real estate agent most of his adult life, but prior to that he had a mechanic shop that he owned for himself, and he also owned a bar for a while that wasn't successful. And I suppose he was a mechanic because in World War II he was in England, and he worked on the airplanes that were sent over to bomb Germany.
Okay. What did you learn from your father?
I suppose I learned discipline from him. Having to get to work, and whether you want to or not, getting up and leaving the house and going to work and that sort of thing. And he used to get phone calls from his clients at home. And so we never got to use the phone because it always had to be available for people that were calling in. And that was just part of the discipline, to be ready for business whenever it came.
But he was disciplined.
Yes, he was.
He was organized.
Very, very.
In those days, did he wear a coat and tie?
Yes, he did.
My father did, and my father wouldn't take his tie off until 9 o'clock at night. And he didn't have a lot of suits, but he wore them well. Your father too, I bet.
Yes, that's right.
And your mother?
My mother was, I guess she was the support of the family. She kept everybody going, as most mothers do. She was very patient, but she made sure all of us were clean and bathed and fed and all those kind of things. And so she was really the glue that held the family together.
Make sure you smelled right.
Yeah, that's right.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I've got 2 brothers and 1 sister.
Okay. And what kinds of fields are they in? Are they in different fields?
Yes, they are. My brother is retired now, but he was a captain in the Navy. Another brother is also self-employed, and he owns a bar and some properties in Amarillo. And my sister is a nurse here at Texas Tech.
Okay. Gosh, a Navy captain, so he was in charge of some ship?
Actually, he was a nurse also, and so he was in charge of hospitals and that sort of thing. He did work on the large aircraft carriers.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's the area that he was in.
Wow. So all of you and your brothers and sister, had moved toward some success. How was that a family message?
Definitely, it was. My father inculcated in us from the time we were small that we were going to go to college. You know, and it didn't, for us, going after high school, we knew that the next step was college, and every one of us went to college.
Did your father have college?
He had a couple of years he had to drop out.
But he had an appreciation for that.
Oh, definitely.
When did you first realize you wanted to study accounting?
Actually, you're talking about being good at math. When I went to the University of Texas at El Paso, my freshman and part of my sophomore year, I was a math major. But it got to where when I was in the higher calculus, I didn't really like the theory as much as I thought I would. And so I was, one day I was talking to a retired Army officer. I don't remember what his rank was. But we were talking, and he said that his father during the Depression was in and out of work the whole time, but that his neighbor, he just made the offhand comment that his neighbor worked throughout the Depression. And just out of curiosity, I asked him what the neighbor did. And he said, well, the neighbor was an accountant. And I thought right then and there that I was going to investigate and see if accounting was something that was interesting.
Wow. And you began to look at the field?
Oh yeah, I took a couple of summer classes because I didn't want to take a long session in case it wasn't for me.
Okay.
But I took the summer classes and really liked it, and after that I just was focused on becoming an accountant.
Wow. What year did you start UTEP?
I started it in fall of 1969.
Okay. And once you got into accounting, you know, my sense is accountants are pretty special people. There's certain things that come easy to them because accounting's not easy. Did it come easy to you, or it just took a lot of work?
Well, it came easily to me. It's very logical, but it still took work to do the homework and learn the concepts and make sure you get them cemented in your mind. But the logic came relatively easily to me.
So you finished your degree in what year?
In December of 1974.
And then when did you take your CPA exam?
You have to have, I think I took the CPA exam as soon as I could after that. So probably spring of 1975
Wow.
is when you can take it.
Wow. Right.
And then you have to have 2 years worth of practice under the tutelage of another CPA. And in those intervening 2 years, I was able to pass all 4 parts of the exam. And so as soon as I was eligible, I was granted the certificates, or recognized as a CPA.
Wow. So after college, you went to work at a CPA firm right away?
Right away.
What did you, how did you like working for a CPA firm?
Oh, I liked it immediately. It was wonderful. The interesting thing for me about that working for a CPA firm was that I went to work for a firm that dissolved about 2 or 3 months after I'd started, and then I wanted to find work in another CPA firm, and what I did was take out the yellow pages out of the telephone book, and just started at the A's and worked my way down until I got to the L's, and that's when I found a job at Lipson, Cox, Colton, and Stoner.
So what did you do, just get on the phone and make phone calls?
Oh no, I went and visited him.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, the process is like working because you have to get up in the morning and just go down the list and go visit everybody and wait in their offices and chat with them if they'll talk to you, and so it took several days to go down the list, and all the people that I talked to were very nice, and the ones that didn't have room for me or whatever reason couldn't talk to me, they let me know and encouraged me to keep trying and that sort of thing. And,
So you were determined.
Oh yes, yes.
Was that part of your characteristic from early on?
I don't know. I think probably everybody has characteristics that don't bloom until you actually need them.
Yeah.
And so I don't think my father would have looked at me and said, "Oh, this guy's going to keep at it." It just worked out that way.
Okay. And so, working for this firm, after 3 months, then they folded. Is that right?
They dissolved.
They dissolved.
They decided they couldn't get along, and so they dissolved the partnership.
And so you found out this other job, and you worked for that company for how long?
Gosh. I worked for them for probably 7 years or so.
Okay. So these 7 years that you worked for a CPA firm, they were did you already have in mind you wanted to have your own business?
You know, I think I did, because one of the ladies that used to work there was a co-worker. Later on, I ran into her, and she reminded me that I had said on several occasions that one day I was going to have my own CPA firm. Although I never remember saying that, I'm sure it was in the back of my mind.
So can we assume that while you're working there, you're learning everything you can, because someday you might want to have your own business?
Well, I don't know that that's the way to say it, but certainly I was learning everything I could just because I liked it.
Okay. So it's something you really enjoy.
Yes, absolutely. I still do.
You still do. What is it you enjoy?
Well, I get a kick out of making sure that that the work is right, and I know that I'm helping people as I do whatever it is I do. You know, we do financial statements, we do tax returns, we do financial planning, we do some tax planning. You know, and my goal is to help people be better off as a result of the work that I do.
If you don't do that work for them, what happens to them?
Well, obviously they need to get the work done. I think if they would find somebody else to do it, probably. You know, whether that somebody else would do it the way I do it, you know, is a toss-up. But I know that what I do it, I'm trying to do the best I can for them and try to get them better off than when they walked in the door.
So where did that come from? One of the things that I know you talk about is culture of an accounting firm. When did you first begin to see that an accounting firm has a culture?
Probably from the first day I walked in and the first day I started doing some work at the accounting firm. The whole culture is to do things correctly and to have an accurate result. And so that's not the way you necessarily have it in perhaps college. I know that sometimes some classes are pretty hard, and so the teachers grade on a curve. And I think for the students that may do them a disservice, because if they come out of school thinking that there's a curve out in real life, well, you know, that just isn't the way it is. You know, imagine a doctor who operates on the wrong leg. You know, even though he did a wonderful operation, you can't grade on the curve.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's the way it is in real life. And that was the culture we ran into when we started working. And the work was either right or it was wrong. And your supervisors told you to redo it if it was wrong, and they patted you on the back if it was correct.
So is it fair to characterize accounting as a field that demands accuracy?
Oh, yes, indeed.
And how do you control for that? How do you hold yourself accountable for that?
Well, in accounting, there's some self-checks that you do. There's some checklists that have to be answered for different things. There's checklists for tax returns. There's checklists for the financial statements. Since everything, you know, pretty much balances, that's the whole deal behind accounting. You know, when you're doing one part of an account, there's always another account that's the other side of it. And so what you may miss on one end, you end up picking up on the other end. And you know, since everything balances, you see it at least twice. The same accounting or the same transaction, you'll see it at least twice.
And you can keep your head clear with all these numbers.
Absolutely. Obviously, you have to get up and walk around a couple of times, but yes, indeed, it's.
But you're trained.
Absolutely.
And so you worked for this firm for so many years, and then what was your next step?
Well, I worked for the firm, and I was offered another job by another CPA firm. And so I took the offer, and I left the first firm I was working for. I think I made a mistake, though, not in the fact necessarily that I left one firm for the other, but I didn't give the bosses a chance over at the first firm to not necessarily to make a counteroffer, but to tell me if they had any plans for me or that sort of thing. I should have consulted with them first about what I was thinking.
In hindsight, you look at that. How did that come to mind? That that's something you should have done?
You know, as you in your private moments, as you think about different things, that's occurred to me, and so I just think I wish I'd have done it.
Because you sense they would have counteroffered.
Not necessarily, you know, but
Okay.
Events subsequent to that, you know, kind of lead me to believe that maybe there wouldn't, not necessarily a counteroffer, because usually you don't make a counteroffer for somebody. But, you know, if they give you enough information, you know, you might be persuaded to stay versus move on to another firm.
And so as you go to this other firm, you found success pretty quick there.
Well, I was fortunate. They told me that they wanted to groom me to be a partner right away.
Okay.
And so, which was what was attractive to me. And so what I needed to do then was develop a base of clients. And so suddenly my focus was not necessarily from doing work and learning work. I had to add to that going out and talking to potential clients and trying to romance some people and that sort of thing, and seeing if they would like to come over and have me be their accountant.
What's the difference between being a partner and not being a partner?
Well, for the firms in El Paso, being a partner generally means that you're going to go out and you're going to acquire clients from different places, and then you're in charge of making sure that the job gets accomplished properly. You get to talk to the chief financial officer, the owners of those different companies, and you understand what their goals are and what they're trying to accomplish with where they're going. And so you try to work in concert with them, and also consult with them as to what they ought to be doing.
But you're part of the profit sharing structure of the firm?
Yeah, yes, going back to that, I'm sorry I wandered off a little bit. But yeah, then you share in the profits of the firm as opposed to just working for a salary. Yes,
Okay.
indeed.
So the incentive is a lot different.
Yes, absolutely.
In that position now, did you learn more, and did the hunger grow for having your own firm sometime?
Well, I think being a partner is almost the same as having your own firm. It just where I ended up is being a sole owner of a firm is, you know, just kind of an evolution of the clients, what their needs were, what I wanted to do, and that sort of thing. So ultimately, I ended up leaving a partnership and starting my own firm, and all the clients went with me, and so it wasn't a difficult thing to do.
So how old were you when you first achieved partnership?
That's a good question. I was 33 years old.
And then when you started your own business, how old were you?
48
So
years
you
old.
worked. You had a lot of years of practice.
Oh, and absolutely.
So when you started your own firm, you were seasoned.
Yes, indeed.
Is that something you would recommend to people when they go out and start their own business?
Yeah, maybe, you know, when I was a partner, I was 32 years old, and so from that point in time, I was pretty well seasoned for most of what I could do.
Okay.
My partners were older than I was, and so if I happened to acquire a client that was older than I and I needed their help, I could always go to them for help, and so I was in a position where I had some resources should I need them. But, you know, by the time I was 48, I thought I'd seen most of what I needed to see.
So as you have your own firm now and not having other partners that you can confer with, what is your reach back? You know, when you have a question, you know, where do you go? How do you get that support as your sole proprietor?
There's a couple of places for support. Some of them is your colleagues, you know, because as you go along, you meet different people, and some people have different areas of expertise than others, and so you make friends with them and you call on them. They call me, you know, for different things, and so there's a little group that consults with each other should the need arise. The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants also has a call-in telephone line for practitioners, and so you can call them for tax questions or financial statement questions, and they're very good at helping people. In addition to that, there's resources that you have to pay for that are written by learned people in different areas, whether it be tax or financial statement preparation. So there's a lot of resources out there as you get to where you know what the resources are and understand how to navigate through them.
So by the time you had your own business, you were pretty seasoned in knowing everything you need to know about accounting, but it's called public accounting, right?
Yes, sir.
And what's the difference between public accounting and not public accounting?
Well, you have to be a CPA certificate holder in order to be able to call yourself an accountant. A person may be a degreed accountant from a university, but under Texas law, they can't call themselves an accountant. And so there's a little bit of a difference. But once public accounting means that I talk to different clients, I consult with different people, bigger clients, smaller clients, that sort of thing, up as to what their needs are. And I don't work for any one particular one. A private accountant would be a person that works inside of one firm and devotes all of their time as an employee to that firm.
Okay. So you serve the public in a sense.
Yes, sir.
And so one of the things that we were talking a little bit about is the culture of a firm. Now you have your own business. And what role does culture play in your own business?
Well, the culture of a CPA firm, I try to keep the same culture as what I learned when I went to work at those other different firms that I was at. And the culture is one of integrity and accuracy. And so, close enough doesn't cut it most of the time. You got to get the exact answer, and you got to know why it's correct. And having learned what I learned, I try to impart that to my employees about being close enough doesn't cut it. And we work hard until we get there.
Well, I wish all businesses had a culture of integrity and accuracy. That's a hard line to toe. How do you monitor that? How do you instill that and build that culture?
Well, I think it's done through talking to folks, and when a mistake is discovered, I think the idea is not to beat somebody up about it. The idea is to talk about it, make the general lessons that are to be learned from having that mistake happen, and how to avoid it the next time and go from there.
Mistakes can be costly in your business then.
Oh yeah, and quite often they, fortunately, I hope that we catch most of them, but we're human like everybody else, and mistakes happen. But the idea is if you have a mistake, you fess up, correct it, and get it behind you.
So when you started your business, your clientele came with you, your existing clientele. Did you focus on a certain area of business you wanted to service, or did you leave that wide open?
It was pretty much wide open, but by that time I had established a toehold in the medical industry, and so I shouldn't say just the medical industry, in the private services industry, and so I had some clients that were engineers, some that were doctors, consultants, and that sort of thing, and so those were the folks that followed me when I started my own personal business.
So you try to help them, keep them from losing money.
Absolutely. I try to make them every year where they're better off than they were the year before.
And do you advise your clients?
A lot of times the answer is yes. The short answer is yes. The long answer is, as we go and we have conversations throughout the year, that advisory capacity kicks in on an ongoing basis. There's some CPA firms that do 3,000 or 4,000 tax returns a year, and those are the smaller ones, and they crank them out pretty quickly. I only do about 200 tax returns of individuals. The rest of them are corporations and partnerships and business returns, and so I don't do a lot of the H&R Block type returns. I devote myself to business tax returns, and that leads to having business all year round.
And you have long-term clients.
Oh yes, indeed.
You have clients with you today that started with you?
Yes, I do. A lot of them still.
And you know them pretty well?
Yes, sir, I do.
And you know their families?
Know their families. The kids have grown up and they're gone.
And the business keeps going?
Absolutely.
To family, or they sell them?
Well, some of them, the businesses disappear when the owner dies. Some of the other business, they have gone on to the children, and the children are still with me, and I consult with them.
So you're part of the success of a business.
I like to think so, yes, sir.
And I want to explore that in depth. But as you come to now, building your own business, having your pool of clients, what fulfillment are you finding in having your own business?
Well, the personal fulfillment comes every day when we accomplish a job and we know it's right and we're ready to move on to the next thing. And every time I do a tax return, I always sit down with the client. I shouldn't say always. I try to sit down with the client and go through the tax return with them, talk about what my observations are and my recommendations for the future.
So you know business inside and out.
I think so.
For your clients.
Yes, sir.
And so your advice goes beyond just accounting. It goes into other areas of the business.
Oh yeah, we talk about education for the children, and just different things like that. Anything that parents have to contend with their children's education, things like that. What's going to be the future of the business? Do we end up selling it to somebody else? How do we get ready to be able to sell it if that's what they decide to do? Retirement planning, retirement plans, and that sort of thing.
So you're really part and parcel of a business. And a business is wise to have a CPA versus an accounting but you say an accountant needs to have a CPA license.
Well, to call himself an accountant, we have a lot of people that are bookkeepers that do pretty good. I don't know that it just depends on how much experience they have. But I guess the older you are, the more experience you have, and that helps you quite a bit.
I want to continue in talking with you about the help that you bring small business and the experience that you have in small business and maybe some good observations about small business as we continue. We're fortunate today to have with us and continue our discussion with Mr. Roberto G. Torres, who owns Roberto G. Torres CPA firm here in El Paso. And we've learned a lot about Mr. Torres, graduating from UTEP with an accounting degree, getting his CPA right away, and building his firm. Mr. Torres, thank you so much for taking time to continue our discussion. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I want to ask you about your family. How long have you been married?
Well, that's a good question. My wife would have the answer right away. 74, probably 38 years. Something like that.
And how many children do you have?
We have one child. He's in California, and he does financial planning.
Does he take after you then?
Well, I don't know that he would like to say that, but he's exclusively in financial planning. He's very good at what he does, and I'm very proud of him.
Did you raise him like you were raised?
You're asking me some difficult questions. I think that we talked about being raised in an area of discipline. Certainly there was discipline. I don't know that it was the same type of discipline that my father had. But he saw where I would get up and go to work every day, and I'd stay home late during like tax season and that sort of thing. And if we had deadlines, he'd know that I'd be at the office late and that sort of thing. The rest of the time I tried to be at home and do the typical things that a father and a husband does, like cut the grass in the backyard and the front yard and that sort of thing, and fix things around the house. And he would be my companion all the time. And so I guess maybe he learned a few things from me. Hopefully he learned all the good things.
Well, he certainly must have. So your father was a real estate agent, so he was independent.
Yes, sir.
And so now, you pretty well are independent. And your son is independent.
Yes, sir.
Is that a mindset?
Well, it's a pattern, if nothing else. I think my dad, I would hear when we had supper, I would hear him talk to my mother, and they'd be talking about different customers and that sort of thing. And so I learned a lot of things just from listening to them at the table, and perhaps I learned a little bit about being independent and some of the benefits that come from that at the dinner table, perhaps.
So that wasn't frightful for you? Well, you weren't afraid to be an independent?
No, I did it pretty well, but I remember when I left the first firm I worked for, and I really truly went independent, and when I was offered that partnership, it was a gut check, because I knew where I was going, and I didn't know if I would be able to do what was required for the next step.
Let me ask you, being a CPA, you know business, but having your own business, did you make mistakes?
Oh, I think one of our bosses at the first firm I worked for said he thinks he made every mistake you could have made. And I didn't try to, but I think I followed in his steps. I think I made every mistake you could have made also.
What kinds of mistakes do you make in business?
Well, some of the things are judgment errors on people. Other things are maybe you should have made the phone call that you didn't make, or just that sort of thing. There's several different kinds of mistakes.
Judgment mistakes on people. What do you mean?
Well, perhaps giving up on somebody sooner than you should have. Maybe not giving them the right kind of encouragement at the right time. Maybe that sort of thing. Encouragement, not seeing. Being so busy with work that you didn't see who they were, what they were talking about, and that sort of thing, and just things like that. Where maybe those things you'd like to go back and undo and do a different way if you could.
How do you learn from your mistakes?
Well, I think you have to have the time to sit back and think about your day, and think about what you've done and what you wish you'd have done, or what you didn't do that you should have done. That sort of thing. And I think you have to just contemplate and figure out whether you did things properly and wish you could have done a different way.
Well, you look at small businesses. You support small businesses. That's your business. You've seen businesses make fatal mistakes in business.
Oh, absolutely.
And how close is any business from making a fatal mistake?
I think the newer businesses are closer to making fatal mistakes than the established businesses. But the thing you need to think about it, I think the thing that keeps you from making a fatal mistake is having a plan. And so that as long as you're executing your plan and you understand what the goal is, then you're less apt to make a mistake than if you don't have one.
Now you have a plan.
Yes, sir, I do.
And how long did it take you to develop that plan?
That's one of the mistakes I made. I should have had a plan at the very beginning, and I didn't. I thought I had a plan in my head, and I suppose I did. It was a rough plan. But the difference between having one that having one mentally and having one that's written is that when it's written, you sort of put yourself in a position where you have to reach that goal. And when you've got a vague plan, you don't necessarily have a specific goal you want to reach. You're just kind of moving in a certain direction.
Yeah, I think I can understand that. Not having a written goal allows me to go anywhere I want. As long as I'm going in a direction, I'm okay. But if it's a goal that's written and I have to reach that goal, it takes discipline to get there.
Yes, sir. That's
so a written plan really helped you.
Absolutely.
And I know you have a vision and a mission. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Well, I think it's a combination. It's a mission statement and a vision statement. What I want to try to do is end up with the results of my work, putting my clients in a better place than they are when they start. And ultimately, I want to make them wealthier. And wealthier has two meanings. One is wealthier in the sense of having money in their bank account. But in addition, perhaps wealthier in the sense that they understand business a little bit better and are able to manage whatever they've got a little bit better. But ultimately, we're talking about them having, with those two things in mind, having a secure future.
When you talk about a secure future, you're talking about having assets that supply income at a later time. Sometimes people go into business without having the asset growing mentality. Under your work, your clients, you help them understand that. Do you see that? Do you see some people coming to you and not understand the value of assets?
I think people come to me, and a lot of times they're not even familiar with what those other assets might be. And so I think that everybody understands having lots of money in the bank, but maybe that's not the best place to have their money stashed away. And so then the idea becomes educate them as to what the other tools there are out there in the community that will help them increase their assets. And ultimately you want to get to a point, if in the ideal world, you get to a point where you don't sweat for your money sweats for you.
Now, as an accountant, you think in numbers. You can read numbers. A lot of us don't think in numbers and can't read numbers. What's the difference? You can numbers tell you a story, right?
Oh yeah, you know, an accountant can look at a set of financial statements or a financial statement and pretty much be able to relate the story back to you of where that particular business is at, and what's good with it, what's not so good with it, and that sort of thing. But in addition, I think I would change the way you describe accountants, you know, in thinking and reading numbers. I think that we use numbers, but really numbers are a tool, and what we have are business concepts and planning concepts. And so more than just understanding and thinking in terms of numbers, we think in terms of concepts and then use the numbers to be able to probably convey that. That's the language that we seem to use.
Like what kind of a concept, for example?
Well, say for example, we're talking about business in general, how to make a business profitable. You know, and so we can look at a list of numbers and be able to say, gosh, this business is profitable, but you've got to be able to understand the concept of why it's profitable. And some of it may be efficiencies in the business, some, you know, different kinds of efficiencies in the business. And an accountant will be able to put his finger on what those efficiencies are. If it's not profitable, an accountant will be able to put his finger on the problems with that particular business and zero in on the particular aspects of it. So the numbers will tell you things, but the concept is maybe you're not collecting your receivables, maybe you're not billing at a high enough rate, that sort of thing. And so it just kind of depends on what the need is, you know. But we read the numbers and then think in terms of bigger concepts than just a specific number.
Where do people learn how to run a business?
Oh, that's an interesting thought. I think ideally you learned at your father's lap, but most of us don't have that luxury. And so you know, you go to school. Obviously, you have to go to school and pay attention in school. The whole idea there is if you think you've got an inclination to be in business for yourself, you need to be thinking about business when you're in school, and really focus on those subjects while you're in school. Talk to another thing you can do is talk to people who are in business. I was really pleased that about a year ago, a young person came and talked to me about what it was like to be in public accounting versus private accounting. And since I'd worked all of my experience has been in public accounting, I was able to talk a lot about what it was like to be in public accounting and what the good side of it was, what the challenges were, and that sort of thing. And but I had to refer him on to somebody else to talk about what it was like to be in private industry. But you know, he was one of the first ones I've ever spoken to that wanted to do that. Unfortunately, he was an El Paso boy, and I think he's going to do great things. Not because of me, but just because he's doing the right things.
So, what is it in your field and more than accounting, helping small businesses grow? What is it that is unique or key about that field?
Well, small businesses, you know, they have the challenge of being being all the departments. You know, if you look at a large business, they've got a human resources department, and then they've got an accounting department, and then they've got this department and that department, depending on how big the business is. But the small business owner has to be everything. And so, if they've got a HR question, well, they've got to get that solved, And if they've got a question about whether to lease or buy, well, then they've got to get that solved from somewhere. And so all those different questions, they've got to find a resource that's going to help them with those things. And they don't necessarily have the experience or the knowledge to be able to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. And so they need to have other resources for that. Those are the kind of challenges that they have.
But I know a lot of small businesses, they go to their accountant to get their quarterly reports, to get their taxes done. They don't get advice like that from their accountant. Is it they're not using them properly?
You know what? I think one of the traps that all of us fall into, and I won't say I haven't fallen into that trap either, is that you get so busy doing what needs to be done just to meet the deadlines that you forget this other part. And you need to take the time to be able to think about the things in advance so that when you have your discussion with your client, you're able to mention those things to them.
So in your experience, you've seen businesses have major problems. Are there a certain set of issues that small businesses face that are pretty serious and pretty common?
Well, one of the most common problems is not paying the IRS taxes when they're due. And the income taxes is one thing, but payroll taxes, on many occasions, a company will get to where it withholds money from payroll from its employees and then fails to pay it over to the IRS. And they forget that that really isn't their money and that it belongs to the employees. And you have a very real fiduciary obligation to be able to, once you withhold it, to pass it on to the IRS. And the IRS takes a very dim view of a business person holding on to that cash. And in fact, they charge penalties for not doing that, and they can close down your business if people do that. And so that's something that's relatively common in a lot of businesses here in El Paso.
And that applies to sales tax as well?
Absolutely, it sure does.
And I know businesses will use the sales tax and payroll taxes as cash flow.
Which they're not supposed to do.
So does that mean that businesses don't have a cash flow plan?
That's exactly what it means. And I think, for the brand new businesses that I have, many of the businesses that I acquire are already ongoing businesses, and they're profitable. But whenever a brand new business comes along, that's one of the things I try to emphasize. And I try to teach them some of the key things that they need to be tracking. And I think a term of art might be a key performance indicator.
Sure.
And one of those things, I know that very recently for a business that we helped start up, we put down among their key performance indicators was what was their bank balance today, and on Friday, how much are we going to need to be able to make payroll? And what are we going to need to make accounts receivable, so that they knew every day what their goal was, so that they wouldn't be behind on doing payroll and behind on paying payroll taxes and that sort of thing.
And that's something they watch every day.
They're supposed to, but if they don't start off knowing that how important that is, a lot of people tend to put that aside. They'll listen to you and they'll hear the logic of it, but if they don't implement it, then it's almost like they're destined for trouble. And so then it's my job to make sure that they understand that that's what they're supposed to do, and make phone calls to remind them. Not only that, but to remind their accounting staff to make sure that they get that sheet of paper in front of that owner by 9 o'clock in the morning.
One of the things that I've seen sometimes is good sales covers a lot of sins.
That's indeed true.
Let me ask you, you make the accounting business seem very easy. Most businesses, when they start, they face a huge challenge of possible failure in our society. More businesses fail than succeed. In talking about your business, you experienced you took time to train, to learn the field. By the time you started your business, you were already seasoned, you were already at that level. You just moved over to have your own business, but you already had been doing it in a sense. So it was kind of like just a transition from one stage to another stage. You make it look easy. Was it really that easy?
Well, I suppose looking back, and thinking about the past, it seemed like everything happened like it was supposed to. But I remember when we first transitioned away from a firm, and when I said all the clients had come with us, which means ultimately they came with us. I can remember waiting for the phone to ring, and sitting by and maybe having not a whole lot to do and waiting for the phone to ring so that I could get started on a task. But, if the clients didn't come, maybe they were talking to other people and, seeing whether they ought to continue on with me or not. And if they did, I'm glad they did, and I'm glad that they ultimately decided to come with me. But no, it wasn't easy. I know that my wife and I missed some paydays, but our staff people never missed any paydays. And yeah, I heard somebody say once that there's a lot of difference between signing a paycheck on the front versus signing it on the back. And I know that every businessman who hears that will understand exactly what I'm talking about. But a lot of times people working for wage for somebody else, don't have the slightest idea of what you go through to make sure that there's enough money in the bank on payday.
So you went through that growth.
Oh, absolutely.
Pain.
Absolutely.
So in your practice in advising other people, does that help you look at your own future?
Well, I'm not sure where your question is going, but I'll try to answer it. In regard to how I look at my future, I think I have a plan. Now I've got to turn around and execute it. You can tell from the gray hair that I'm close to retirement. And so I've got a plan for retirement, which means making sure that my business is solid, making sure that it works without me being there to run it. And for a business person, when you've got a business that you can walk away from and it continues to gin and make money for you and that sort of thing, then that's when you've got a business that you can sell. And I want to get to that point, if I'm not already there, and then turn around and look for somebody that I can sell the business to. And maybe they'll let me stick around and come in on the morning and drink coffee and read the Wall Street Journal or something so I can get out of the house.
At one time in your business growth, in your business experience, in your work life, could it be said you were a workaholic?
The workaholic is not a nice term. Sometimes it's pejorative. But I did work a lot. And I think I think only at one point in time did I get to be where I was a workaholic. And my wife called that to my attention in a very nice way. And so then I changed things at the office so that I didn't continue with those bad habits.
And what did you have to do?
Get organized. I think part of it is the organization and be able to delegate to folks and that sort of thing as opposed to doing it all yourself.
So maybe workaholic isn't the right term. Maybe it's just so much to do and you're the only one that can do it. You just do it. But I think you explained it pretty well. You're not organized.
Yeah, and that's the, you talk about one of the mistakes you can make. That's definitely one of them, and you have to organize yourself so that you can pass the work on to somebody else. All the work can be done by somebody else, but you've got to organize it in a fashion that they can do it. So that's one of the keys.
I remember years ago I spoke to a gentleman that I asked him. He had some retail stores. I remember Mr. Ratner. He was very strong with the chamber. He'd had some business downtown. And I said, when I start a business, I want to have a business that has $1 million in sales. And he says to me, you don't have to have $1 million in sales to make money. So what is good in terms of a business, not in terms of amounts, but how would you describe a good business path?
Well, maybe you need to start with where you want to end up, in the sense that, if you want to make $300,000 a year, then you start with that and figure out what it's going to take in terms of sales to get you there, how many employees, what kind of investment in capital you're going to have, and those types of things. And I think Mr. Ratner was absolutely right. You don't need to have $1 million to have a very comfortable living.
It's just something that you have to come to terms with, what kind of a life you want. So in that, you're saying that you can pretty well plan a business to meet your goals.
I think, it would probably be too simplistic to say that. More than anything, I think I'm thinking about a professional services business, which is the one I'm most familiar with. If you're talking about a manufacturing agency and that sort of thing, obviously they're going to need a whole lot more in terms of equipment and more of the inventory type things, and that requires more of an investment. But I think ultimately you need to figure out where you want to be at the end of the year for yourself. And you can still get there in those other types of businesses, but I think you need to still work in that direction. Start from where you want to end up and work toward the top.
So what would you recommend, with all your experience today, to a small business, somebody in the middle of growing a business, or maybe somebody starting a business? What kinds of things would you recommend?
The first thing I would recommend to them is to have a plan. The plan should cover what their sales are going to be, exactly what they're going to need in terms of resources to accomplish their sales. As we just talked about, you need to have a plan of where you want to end up in terms of income. Income is the thing that gets by you so much of the time as a small businessman, because there's inefficiencies in things that you do, things that your staff people do. For example, the failure to get organized, like we talked about before, and you end up doing more than you should be doing, and you've got staff people waiting on you and that sort of thing. Having a plan helps you get to where you don't have as many of those types of inefficiencies. When you do the plan, a lot of times that's going to involve some financial statements, some pro formas. A lot of times the pro formas are way too optimistic, both in sales and in cost. So you think you're going to have higher sales than you actually end up having, and you end up with probably higher costs than you originally estimate that you're going to have. And so when both elements of your financial statement don't seem to work, then a small business doesn't work either. And those are the difficult things. But I think having a plan is going to help you avoid most of the mistakes that a small business person makes when they first start off.
And being realistic about your projections.
Absolutely.
And really knowing the market. There's a lot.
A lot of times people don't know the market well enough. They think they do, but they don't. And I was talking to a friend yesterday who's also an accountant, and he was talking about a business that a very close friend of his went into. And they thought they knew the market because they were working in it, and their financials, their estimates were off, despite the fact that they thought they knew the market, So it's a very difficult thing to gauge.
Well, I've certainly learned a lot of good tips and learned a lot about your business, and I appreciate that a lot. I hope in telling the story of your business you can reflect on your own business a little bit.
Thank you. Yep.
And you've certainly built something to be proud of. You're proud of what you've done.
Yes, sir, I am.
And your family's proud of what you've done.
Well, I hope so.
And no, it's beautiful to build a business. It's a beautiful work, and that's what it is. It's a work that you've accomplished. And I certainly appreciate your taking time to share with us your story. I've learned appreciation for accountants and the value they bring to a small business, and certainly recommend that small businesses find a good accountant to work with, that they can seek advice from, and maybe interview them before they take them on, to see that they have a relationship, because you really build a relationship with your clients.
Yes, we do.
And I can see where that's important to you. Well, I certainly appreciate the time that you've given us, and the story that you've told. It certainly has been worthwhile for me, and I trust it's been worthwhile for those viewers that are watching the show. And so this concludes our interview with Roberto G. Torres. I appreciate that very much, and I hope those of you that are watching will keep your eyes open to our future shows.